before we proceed with the cross-examination by Ms. Brady of Dr. Fenton's testimony, I want to remind you, folks, of an instruction that I have given you before, and it applies with respect to Dr. Fenton's testimony, and that is that the court has admitted the testimony of Dr. Fenton only for a limited purpose. You may consider this testimony only as to the issues raised by the defendant's plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. You shall not consider this evidence for any other purpose. And I've explained to you before that when I refer to the issues raised by the defendant's plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, I mean issues related to two questions. Number one, whether the defendant was so diseased or defective in mind at the time of the commission of the act as to be incapable of distinguishing right from wrong with respect to that act. And number two, whether the defendant suffered from a condition of mind caused by a mental disease or defect that prevented him from forming a culpable mental state that is an element of a crime charged. I've explained it to you also in terms of the elements. That's a different way of explaining this, and that is that, as you know, sanity is an element of each and every crime charge in this case. That is to say, the prosecution has the burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant was not insane at the time of the commission of the act. And so this testimony of Dr. Fenton is being introduced only for the limited purpose of considering that particular element, only with respect to that element, and not with respect to any other element of any crime charge. Does everybody understand that? And everyone's saying yes or nodding their head yes. Great. All right. Doctor, I remind you that you're still under oath.
Yes.
And with that, Ms. Brady, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Fenton, we were, at the time we took the break, we were talking about your first meeting with Mr. Holmes, which occurred on March 21st of 2012, correct?
Correct.
And in your notes, you sometimes put like an A and a P. Does that mean your assessment when you put A and then you describe some things you see? Does that stand for assessment?
Did you say A and
then it's
P?
like you put an A with a colon. Does that mean assessment?
Probably. Let me look at exactly what you're looking at. So is it the notes from the 321 visit?
Correct.
Okay. Oh, I see what you mean. The top of the second page, the handwritten page.
Correct.
It says A dash.
You're right.
Yes, that's my assessment.
Okay, so A dash OCD. Does that mean you are wondering whether he has obsessive compulsive disorder?
That my assessment at that time is that he likely has obsessive compulsive disorder and also social phobia.
Okay. And his obsessive compulsive disorder, the obsessive thought, again, is that he obsesses about killing people.
Yes.
Okay. You note in that first meeting that he has possible psychotic level thinking.
Yes.
Possible schizoid personality disorder.
Yes.
And when you were talking to him about his homicidal ideation, and homicidal ideation, is that just thoughts about homicide?
Yes.
All right. So you're talking about his homicidal ideation. Was it significant to you that he said that these thoughts were worse than they had ever been in the past?
Yes.
It was your opinion at that first meeting that although he did not currently seem to be dangerous, you thought that it warranted further understanding and following?
Yes.
All right. He described for you that as a child he was outgoing and talkative.
Correct.
In around 5th grade or so is when he got glasses.
Yes.
And that at that point he realized he wanted to, and you quoted, I believe, his words as being overcome biology.
Yes.
Was that an odd thought to you?
I thought it was.
and the phrase overcome biology just from getting a pair of glasses?
I didn't know what he meant.
Okay. Did you ever come to understand what that meant?
No.
After he got glasses, or around that time in his life, he reported that he became very quiet,
Yes.
and he didn't like to talk to other people.
Right.
He doesn't like to speak in front of people.
Correct.
It was his impression, at least, that his mother was somewhat depressed.
He said that when he was in 8th grade, he thought maybe his mother was depressed.
And the family went to counseling, and Mr. Holmes thought that that was a waste of time.
Yes.
And you knew that he went to college at University of California at Riverside,
Yes.
and he was in the neuroscience program there.
Correct.
Now, he was reporting to you that here in Colorado, he felt increased stress.
Right.
And we've talked about the girlfriend problems that he was having.
Yes.
He told you that the solution to his biological problem would be to eliminate the problem, that being homicide.
That's what he said.
That's how he would eliminate the problem, would be through homicide.
Yes.
Did you understand what he meant, that to eliminate the biological problem, it would be eliminated by homicide?
No, I didn't understand that.
Did you ever come to understand what he meant by that?
No, I tried asking him more about it.
And he was unable to give you any better explanation of that?
Correct.
And he stated that you can't kill everyone, so that's not an effective solution.
Yes.
He told you on March 21st of 2012 that he thinks about homicide 3 to 4 times a day,
Yes.
and that he tries to distract himself from those thoughts by watching TV and movies.
Correct.
On that date, that was the first time that you prescribed him any medications, was at that first meeting with him.
Correct.
That's when you prescribed the sertraline at 50 milligrams,
Yes.
the Klonopin at 0.5 milligrams, twice a day.
0.5 milligram tablets, and he was to take either a half or 1 tablet half a day, or twice a day.
Okay, and that's reflected in your notes in Exhibit 1248, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. The sertraline, you testified, you were hoping that the sertraline would help with these obsessive thoughts.
Yes.
And you were hoping that the Klonopin would help reduce his anxiety.
Yes, and the sertraline furthermore would help with the anxiety, but it would take a while, so we needed something that would work right away, like the Klonopin.
Okay. At that first meeting, at the conclusion of that first meeting, you were worried that Mr. Holmes had possibly dipped into psychotic thinking.
Well, I under my A assessment, I had question mark psychotic level thinking. So I couldn't tell, but I thought perhaps some of these odd statements reflected disorganized thinking.
Okay. Let's move on to the second visit, which would be March 27th, correct?
Correct.
Can you tell us, I think you said in direct, that you thought that that was a medication check, and that meeting lasted 15 to 20 minutes?
Correct.
Can you note that on the calendar, please?
Okay, I put JH med check with LF 15 to 20 minutes.
Thank you. That's on March 27th, correct?
Correct.
Great. And so you were checking in with him about how the medication was working for him.
Yes.
And he reported that the Klonopin made him sleepy,
Yes.
that it caused him difficulties in remembering stuff,
Right.
and he did not feel less anxious.
Correct.
So you were hoping that it would reduce his anxiety. It was not reducing his anxiety.
Correct.
And because of that, you just decided to try the propranolol?
Correct.
And is that Propranolol?
Yes.
Okay. And so you switched the propranolol for the Klonopin,
Correct.
and that was at 10 milligrams twice daily.
Correct.
Now, the sertraline, Mr. Holmes reported no change in his obsessive compulsive symptoms.
Correct.
The next visit would be on April 3rd, 2012,
Yes.
and that also was a medication checkup for 15 to 20 minutes.
Yes.
Can you note that on the calendar, please?
I put JH med check with LF 15 to 20 minutes.
Great, thank you. You asked him how the propranolol was working for him, and he said it seemed to help, but he was, again, having troubles with memory in his lab.
Right.
And he also noted, and this is when you said he reported that he was sleeping more, approximately 9 hours a day,
Yes.
and still felt tired.
Yes.
And that's when you decided to move the sertraline to later in the day
Correct. We moved it to 6 p.m.
and decrease the propranolol to a half a tablet twice a day.
Correct.
So you cut that dose in half.
Yes.
You spoke to Mr. Brockler a little bit about Mr. Holmes's eye contact, that he was bad at eye contact,
Correct.
that he would look down, he would look side to side, he would occasionally look at you or Dr. Feinstein.
Yes.
And you also noted that sometimes his eyes seemed very wide open.
Not sure if that's in the note, but yes, they did seem sometimes very wide open.
Okay. If we can go to the next visit, which would be April 17th, I believe.
Yes.
And that was for, it was a medication check, but it was also a meeting, a longer appointment that you wanted to have with him.
It was.
How long do you think that visit lasted?
Probably 30, maybe 40 minutes.
Okay. Do you want to note that on the calendar, please?
Sure. So I added on the 17th, JH met with LF 30 to 40 minutes.
Thank you. You asked him about the 100 milligrams of sertraline, and he reported no change yet.
Correct.
So no decrease in his obsessive thoughts of killing people.
Correct.
He was still taking the propranolol 10 milligrams twice daily.
Yes, I'd recommended to cut that in half, but he had continued at the 10 milligrams twice a day.
All right. He still reported being tired during the day.
Yes.
At this visit, he actually reported an increase in obsessive thoughts.
Yes.
So the sertraline was hopefully to decrease the obsessive thoughts, and he reports that there's an increase in the obsessive thoughts.
He had broken up with his girlfriend about a week prior, and so he said he was doing okay, but that he had an increase in those obsessive thoughts regarding women.
And it was women, men, and all. Is that correct?
Yes, he told me he had 3 categories of thoughts, and those were the 3.
And when we're talking about these thoughts, we're talking about the homicidal thoughts. Is that right?
Yes, the homicidal thoughts.
In your notes, for the sake of the jury, when you describe this, you use the symbols for male, the circle with the arrow, and then the
Yes.
circle with the plus for the female, and then
Yes.
all, right?
Yes, that's what I mean by those symbols.
Okay, so those are the 3 categories of homicidal thoughts. He's having killing women, killing men, killing everyone.
He didn't exactly say that, but he said, I have 3 categories of thoughts.
Okay. You noted in your notes that he won't give any details.
Right.
And so is the situation not that he's saying, no, I don't have any plans, or is it the situation that he's saying, I won't tell you?
And you're asking at this particular visit?
Well, when you write won't give any details, is that where he's just saying, he's either remaining silent or he's saying, I'm not going to tell you that?
And at this particular visit, I don't remember exactly. Over all of the visits, sometimes he would just be silent. Sometimes he would say, no. If I say, do you have a plan? No. Other times he'd just sort of say something, but it wouldn't really answer the question.
So when he would not answer, when he would remain silent, or when he wouldn't answer, I assume that was a red flag for you.
In what do you mean by red flag?
Well, if you're asking him, do you have a target who you're going to kill, or do you have a plan for killing people, and he just remains silent, is that not concerning?
It is, and so I when he does that, I still don't know what's going on in his head.
Okay. On this day, it appears that he really got into wanting to talk to you about philosophy of life.
Yes.
And you said that he got kind of angry that you would not tell him your philosophy of life.
It was.
Did you know what he was talking about, like what he wanted you to tell him?
I had no idea.
And did he appear to believe that he had told you his philosophy of life?
Yes, in fact, well, that's what he said to me. I've told you all of mine, and I didn't know what he meant.
Did you ever understand what he meant by that?
No.
And that's when he accuses you, are you just a pill pusher?
Right.
He appeared to believe that you knew his philosophy of life. Is that what it seemed like?
Perhaps.
And that he thought it was only fair if you shared your philosophy of life with him.
Sort of seemed like that.
It seems like somewhat of a confusing situation.
I didn't understand what he meant.
Okay. So your assessment at that meeting, again, you write psychotic level thinking.
Yes.
When you say psychotic level thinking, are you talking about thoughts that are illogical and out of touch with reality?
Yes.
You felt that he was guarded.
Yes.
You felt that he was paranoid.
Yes,
You thought that he had hostile thoughts that he wouldn't elaborate on,
yes,
but he was taking his medication and continuing to come to the appointments.
as far as I knew, he was taking his medication and he was coming to the appointments.
Okay. Did you have any reason to think he wasn't taking his medication?
No,
You wrote on that day an assessment for schizotypal personality disorder plus or minus a frank psychotic disorder.
correct.
Can you explain the plus or minus frank psychotic disorder, please?
So the psychotic level thinking, I thought intermittently he was having those thoughts that were illogical. And people with severe personality disorders can get that. So for instance, with the schizotypal personality disorder, at times they can have that psychotic level thinking. So I thought probably it was related to the schizotypal personality disorder, but another possibility would be a frank psychotic disorder.
And you were still considering obsessive compulsive disorder?
Yes, at that point I was a little less certain, so I put rule out OCD.
And you also seem to be trying to decide between social phobia or, again, a manifestation of his psychotic level thinking.
Correct.
You note that you're more worried about his homicidal ideation than suicidal ideation.
Yes.
It was at that appointment where you increased the sertraline to 150 milligrams
Correct.
and continued the propranolol at 10 milligrams twice daily.
Yes.
All right. The next event, we'll call it, that sort of occurs is on April 17th when you write that prescription with the wrong name.
Correct.
Do you want to note that on the calendar on April 17th?
Okay, so on the April 17th, I put LF wrote incorrect last name on script.
And I think it was April 22nd when he emailed you about that.
Yes, that was a Sunday.
Do you want to note that email on April 22nd?
I put JH emails LF re-script mistake.
And you rewrite the prescription, I think, on April 23rd or 24th?
I actually didn't write it, I just called it directly into the pharmacy.
Called it in. Do you want to note that on the calendar, call in prescription?
And was that the 23rd that I did that? Here, I'll look at the, yeah, it looks like it's the Monday the 23rd. Is that
Okay.
what you have? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, Monday the 23rd, LF calls in script with correct name.
Great, thank you. Your next visit with him would be on May 1st of 2012. Do you remember how long approximately that meeting would have been?
I believe that was about 30 to 40 minutes.
Do you want to note that on May 1st?
May 1st, J.H. met with L.F. 30 to 40 minutes.
Okay. And this was the meeting where you stated that when Mr. Holmes got there, you asked how he was doing, and he replied, good.
Yes.
And you thought that that was somewhat of a rote answer.
Yes.
And you noted in your reports that he looked silent and sullen.
Yes.
You talked to him about the wrong prescription and the emoticon. This was that meeting?
Yes.
And after he talks about the emoticon, he makes the statement, violence. Is that what you needed to hear?
Yes.
Do you know what he meant by that? What was your impression of that statement?
My impression was that he was referring to his worries that someone was going to lock him up.
And he quite often had this worry that he was going to be locked up by you or Dr. Feinstein.
He came back to it a number of times.
Did you follow up on that when he said violence? Is that what you needed to hear? Did you ask him, what's that about? What do you mean by that?
Something along those lines, yes.
And did you note in your notes what he meant by that?
No.
Okay. He stated at this meeting that he was dating or seeing another girl in the neuroscience program.
Yes.
And he said that it was dangerous because the class was so small. That's how you took that statement to mean.
Correct.
Sort of like coworkers dating that could be dangerous.
Exactly.
Okay. And he said that he went hiking with this girl,
Yes.
and he said, my biology betrayed me.
Yes.
Did that again seem strange to you?
It did, so I asked him about it.
And what did
And this
he say?
time he replied something. He said allergies.
Okay. Any more detail on that?
No.
Did he tell you that this girl liked him first?
Yes.
That she sort of approached him. He doesn't approach people.
Yes.
He told you that he had been playing video games,
Correct.
and you put in your report MMORPG.
Yes.
By that, do you mean massive multiplayer online role-playing game?
Massively multiplayer online role-playing games, yes.
So it was your understanding that the type of games he played were like action role-playing games?
Correct.
You asked him about the sertraline, and he stated, I think, nothing, not better.
Right, he gave me a few different answers. Once he said no change or nothing. Another time he said he was not better. But then I asked him specifically, did he feel like he was having, it was a little easier to interact interpersonally? He said yes.
And he wanted to stop the propranolol.
Yes, he didn't think it was helping at that point.
Okay. At this point is where you are considering bringing in another doctor,
Correct.
because you don't know what to make of him or his symptoms, really.
Correct.
And you mentioned this idea to him, and he again is worried that it'll be to lock him up.
Yes.
Did you ever ask him, why do you think we're going to lock you up, or why would we lock you up? Anything like that?
Yes, and he just wouldn't answer further.
Okay. You noted in your report that you asked him what he would like to do about his homicidal thoughts, but he never gave a coherent answer.
Correct.
And that's when he said, you see it in a utilitarian way. You'd want to eliminate that. You'd have to see it that way.
Yes.
You have any idea what he meant there?
No.
Did you ever understand what he meant there?
No.
Okay.
That was also the meeting where he started commenting on you, that you do certain things like crinkle your nose to indicate dislike.
Yes,
And he also told you you have an unconscious that makes you do things.
yes, that was regarding my mistake on the prescription.
Okay. Did that seem like an odd comment?
It was either odd or he knew something about psychology because in a way that was exactly right.
So like you didn't like him, so you messed up the script, or what do you think he was attributing to your unconscious about the mistake? on the script?
That I don't know.
Okay. The next visit would have been on May 31st,
Yes,
and was that the first time that Dr. Feinstein was involved?
correct.
Can you note that on May 31st, that it was both you and Dr. Feinstein, and if you can remember approximately how long that visit would have been?
And that, I believe, was a full 45, 50 minutes.
Okay.
So I put on May 31st, J.H. met with L.F. and R. Feinstein, 45 to 50 minutes.
Great, thank you. So you said that at this appointment, it was Dr. Feinstein really leading the interview and you were listening.
Correct.
At this visit, Mr. Holmes says that he's addicted to Diablo 3 and is playing that game approximately 100 hours in the past 2 weeks.
Well, specifically, the quote I have is, get addicted to games. So I don't know if he said specifically he was addicted to Diablo 3, but then he went on to say he was playing Diablo 3 100 hours in the past 2 weeks.
And not studying for his final exams.
Correct.
He also said at this meeting that he had been reading Nietzsche, Kaczynski, and Tylenol Terrorist.
Correct.
Was that in response to a question, or do you remember what it was that prompted that statement from him?
As far as I remember, Dr. Feinstein was asking him something about what else do you do in your free time, what type of things do you like to read?
Did you find it concerning that I assume that is in reference to Ted Kaczynski,
I think so.
the Unabomber?
Yes.
Did you find it concerning that he was reading about the Unabomber?
Yes.
Did you find it concerning he was reading about the Tylenol terrorists?
Yes.
He also stated that he hates sheeple and shepherds, and I think you testified earlier you did not know what that meant.
I don't know what that means.
Dr. Feinstein talks to him about further talking and perhaps trying an antipsychotic medication.
Yes.
Dr. Feinstein said to Mr. Holmes that he couldn't really prevent a suicide or homicide in the long run if the person is intent on it.
Yes.
And when you would ask him if he was considering hurting himself, he would say he wasn't going to hurt himself, sort of emphasizing the word myself. I'm not going to hurt myself.
He said that once. I don't recall exactly which visit he said that, but I do remember that.
And that left you with the impression that he could perhaps hurt someone else.
Yes.
And the final visit was on June 11th,
Correct.
again with Dr. Feinstein?
And myself.
Correct. And I think you said it ended up lasting about 20 minutes?
Yes.
If you could note that on June 11th, please.
JH, final visit with LF and RF, about 20 minutes.
And you don't have written notes for this meeting, but you have that final report that's typed up.
Correct.
This is the meeting where he tells you that he failed his final exam?
When I asked him how it went, he said he failed.
And you thought that he was exhibiting sort of inappropriate affect or reaction to that news?
He seemed more relaxed than I would have thought.
And even though he seemed relaxed, you also thought he had an extra edge to his voice during that meeting?
Yes,
Sort of an angry tone,
at times,
a bit hostile?
yes.
You wrote in that report, knowing his history of anger and homicidal ideation towards seemingly most of the human race, we proceed to assess his level of dangerousness.
Yes.
It was at this visit where he really seemed to exhibit some paranoid thinking,
I thought so.
because he was talking about what you've described, what you told Dr. Feinstein, well, Fenton's afraid of me.
Yes.
And he said, like that time she locked me out of the office.
Yes.
And just so it's clear to that jury, the door being locked had nothing to do with James Holmes, correct?
Correct.
You didn't lock him out.
I did not lock him out. I accidentally, when I came in, didn't properly fully unlock it.
Okay. But he thought that that locked door was meant for him.
I think so. That's what he said anyway.
Same with the conspicuous package behind your chair. Did that, if you had a package, did it have anything to do with James Holmes?
No.
But he felt like it did.
It seemed like it from his statement.
And that seemed paranoid to you?
I thought so.
Dr. Feinstein talks to Mr. Holmes about continuing in therapy, and I think the quote was, getting help for his life.
Yes.
And you thought that he paused,
Yes.
almost like he was considering it. You thought maybe he was considering it.
Yes.
And then it seemed to be overruled by something else, and he declined.
Correct.
And then he got up and left.
Right.
You still had significant concerns about his homicidal thoughts.
I did.
In that final report, you note, and I'll quote, he may be shifting insidiously into a frank psychotic disorder such as schizophrenia,
Yes.
though does not have the more rapid worsening of function typical of most psychotic breaks.
Correct.
So you were at least considering whether he was sort of shifting into a schizophrenic state.
Correct.
You also noted that his fear/hatred of humans has markedly impaired him.
Yes.
Because you were still concerned, even after he left, that's when you decided to activate this beta team.
Yes.
One of the people you called was an officer, Lynn Witten, Whitten,
Correct.
at campus, the campus police department,
Yes.
and told her that you thought James Holmes might be psychotic, and that he was in the age group for the first psychotic break.
I don't remember exactly what I told her, but it was likely it was something to that effect.
And what's the reference to the age group for a first psychotic break? What's that mean?
So in schizophrenia and some other related psychotic disorders, Usually the first significant symptoms occur in young adulthood.
Early 20s?
For males, usually teens, early 20s, females a little bit later.
Okay. And you were contacting the people on the beta team because you were worried about his homicidal thoughts, not his anxiety.
Correct.
You testified earlier that you also took the step of calling Mr. Holmes's mother.
Yes.
That would be Arlene Holmes.
Yes.
And she told you that he always had, or at least since he was a young child, had had this sort of anxiety around people.
Correct.
She did not tell you she had ever heard of him having thoughts of killing people.
No, no.
Just that he was very stressed and anxious and awkward around people.
Correct.
She seemed concerned and engaged with you.
Yes.
Some of the other sort of symbols that you use in your notes for the sake of the jury, if you use an arrow that goes up or an arrow that goes down, is that a symbol for like increased or decreased?
Yes, and if you tell me exactly where it is, I could accurately tell you.
Sure. Now that I'm looking for it, I can't find it. Is that something, that symbols you commonly use, like of increased
I do.
stress, decreased stress?
Right, right. It's going to mean increase or more or something if it's up, and decrease or less, something to that effect if it's down.
Okay. And you've used the initials RF for Robert Feinstein, Dr. Feinstein?
Yes.
Now, at that last meeting with Dr. Feinstein, you and/or Dr. Feinstein expressed to Mr. Holmes that you were concerned he might be having a nervous breakdown.
Yes.
Now, is it true, Dr. Fenton, that you and the university have been civilly sued by some of the victims in this case?
Yes.
And that case has been put on hold until the conclusion of this criminal case?
Yes, it's on administrative hold.
Ultimately, you did not hospitalize Mr. Holmes?
He never met criteria for me to hospitalize him.
And you did not follow up with him after June 11th of 2012?
I offered for him to come back. We offered him free treatment even though his insurance was going to be expired, but he never came back.
You didn't call him on the phone to check up with him?
No.
Didn't send him a letter expressing concerns?
No.
Send him a letter recommending other community mental health treatment?
We had recommended all kinds of treatment and he had refused at the last visit.
Did you ever send him a letter emphasizing the importance that he continue treatment?
No.
Overruled?
I think you stated no to that.
No.
Okay. shortly after June 11th, you closed Mr. Holmes's file?
I wouldn't say that's accurate. I guess I sort of always hoped maybe he would come back for treatment, so I didn't see him again, but I wouldn't say I closed his file.
There was no other interaction with you and Mr. Holmes?
Correct.
Your Honor, at this point, I would move to admit D-TR-62, that calendar.
Is there any objection, Mr. Brockler?
No, sir.
All right, without objection, it is admitted. That's D-TR-62.
Can I have just a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, take your time.
Your Honor, I don't have any more questions on cross-examination. I would ask at some point to publish the prosecution's Exhibit 1248.
Do you have any objection, Mr. Brockler, at some point publishing P-TR-1248?
No, sir.
All right, we'll do it at some point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Brockler, do you have any redirect?
I do, sir. Thank you. Hey, doctor. When somebody tells you they don't want you to be their doctor anymore, are you even legally entitled to pursue them for additional treatment?
Legally, I don't know, but I suppose I wouldn't chase after them if they said, no, I don't want any more treatment.
Do you know what HIPAA is?
Yes.
What's HIPAA?
HIPAA is a law that keeps a patient's medical records confidential.
Are you aware whether or not HIPAA mandates that a provider is not entitled to email, mail, or contact a patient without prior authorization? Are you aware of that?
No, I'm not. Is that the fact?
I'm just asking if you know that.
I don't know that.
Is it your practice when someone leaves your practice to chase after them and seek to continue to treat them?
No, I've never done that.
Had you told his mother of your concerns and the different issues, some of which he had brought up to you?
Yes.
Now, I want to talk to you about a couple things here. There's a lot of discussion about things that he told you, things that he didn't told you, and what we're trying to guess is going on between his ears on that limited information. Fair?
Fair.
One of the other things that you look for is it how whatever it is that's going on affects his function, his ability to get by in his day-to-day life?
Yes.
Now, in addition to the fact that he continued to make appointments, show up to them all the time, and his hygiene and personal dress never seemed to change, were there other things that you looked at to see if he had some sort of stability or impairment of function?
Yes.
Tell us.
So in the last visit, we were especially looking at this. So we looked at for financial stressors, and that's when he told us, well, he planned to get a job. He had about $10,000 saved up, and if he really got into financial extremis, he thought his parents would help him. We also looked to see if perhaps he was very embarrassed about dropping out of the program, and he said, well, no, he told one friend who had asked him, he planned to tell his parents. He didn't think his parents would be surprised because he'd dropped some hints via email that he wasn't sure if he was going to be staying in the program anyway, and he said that they would support whatever decision he made. So he seemed to have that family support. We also looked at if he was perhaps mad at the program itself. He seemed to feel, he failed this was on him, and it was his choice to exit the program, and he knew he was going to have to go meet with his advisor and turn in his badge and do some paperwork.
How about statements related to his acknowledgement that he had signed a contract, a promise, a lease, and he intended to honor it?
that too. We asked him, oh, well, you moved back to California now. He said, no, I have a lease that lasts through November, and I probably won't break that. I'll stay here and get a job.
Despite the comments that both myself and Ms. Brady elicited from you that the defendant said, did he ever appear to you at any of those appointments to lose control, to get into a rage, to wave his arms, to do anything out of the ordinary like that?
No.
Your email contacts with him, did he ever not respond to your email contacts?
No.
He always responded?
Correct.
Let's take a look at some of them too to see how this may have affected his functioning. Can you look at some of the later emails? Let's go to, it's the chain that involves that emoticon thing, and it's dated, yours is dated April 24th. Your Honor, may I approach and just show her the page? So that
Yes.
yeah, ma'am, it's this one right here.
Would you show Ms. Brady which one you're looking at?
I will. And it's at the bottom, ma'am. It says JM2709, which means nothing. But
All right, thank you.
you see that one?
18. Yes, I see that one.
Now, in this particular email exchange that appears to take place on April 23rd, from him, April 23rd, what is he emailing you about?
He is emailing me about the fact that when he went to the pharmacy, the prescription said James Hughes instead of James Holmes, so he couldn't get it filled.
Later in that conversation, about midway on that page where it says on April 23rd.
Oh, yes, I see that.
What is he asking you about there?
So he says if they have 300 milligram tablets, it will save twice the money.
What's that a reference to?
And that is a reference to where I prescribed him 150 milligrams. A lot of times it's cheaper to take half of a pill. So if he were able to get the 300 milligram size and take half, then it would be cheaper.
So he's emailing you about how to be more cost conscious?
Well, for him, it would cost less money for him, yes.
Turns out, though, they don't have those 300 milligram pills.
Right, it doesn't come in that size.
Let's go to the next page. I think it's the next page. Hang on. That's not true. It says JM2710 at the bottom, but it's not the next page. It's an email dated May 25th at the very top. It's about 3 or 4 pages over, ma'am.
I see it.
Go down towards the bottom of that, which is the beginning of that chain for me, okay?
Yes.
May 18th, you email him about meeting with you and Dr. Feinstein. And how does he, first off, does he respond to that email?
He does.
This is now May 18th. And
Yes.
what does he say?
He says, why do we need to meet if you can just phone in the prescription?
And then up here on May 25th, you see that the second half of the page up above there?
I do.
Okay. You responded to his email, why do we need to meet if you can just phone in the prescription, with what?
I said, good point. Let's wait until we can schedule the consultation with Dr. Feinstein. Here are some upcoming days when he can meet.
You give them. And does he respond to that email?
He does.
What does he
He
say?
says, did you refill the prescription?
Now, through all of the email responses back and forth that you've had through your time with the defendant, are any of them misspelled or grammatically incorrect?
No,
Action relevance.
Overruled?
Are they, ma'am?
no,
And every email gets responded to?
yes.
In fact, does he end up changing up some of the signature blocks as we move from March when he first introduced to you to the end here where he leaves no signature block?
Yes.
Does he ever say to you in response to those drugs, and you and Miss Brady had talked about comments that he'd made when you checked on him, did he ever tell you that the sertraline caused him to lose the fear?
No,
Did he ever tell you he wanted to stop the sertraline?
no.
There was something that, and I'm asking for clarification here, there was something that you said on cross with Miss Brady about at one point you had recommended a reduction in how much he was taking of something, but he didn't do it?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So that was the propranolol. which works immediately for anxiety, and is usually not sedating. So he felt that it was helpful at the initial dose of 10 milligrams twice a day, but that he, like the Klonopin, seemed to have a little trouble remembering things for the lab meeting. So I suggested, well, let's try a lower dose, 5 milligrams twice a day.
What did he say?
At that visit, he said, fine. But then when he came back the next time, he said, well, actually, he had kept it at 10 twice a day, and he seemed to have adjusted to the cognitive slowing.
Showing some independence from your advice.
Correct.
Did you ever see him engage in trichotillomania in your office, the hair pulling, anything like that?
No.
Did he ever show you any bald spots on his head or any other part of his body related to that, what he said to Miss Roth?
No.
Did you perceive him to be quite intelligent?
Yes.
One other thing I wanted to get clarification on from you, and that was he discusses that the new girl he's with from the neuroscience program, the dangerous one.
Yes.
Miss Brady had asked you if he had told you how that relationship began or who approached who. Do you remember that?
I do.
And what did he tell you?
He said she approached me first. I don't approach people. Something to that effect. It's in the note.
He did not tell you that he initiated contact with her by texting her and she responded?
No.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
You may.
One last thing. You were shown this this law that I think said what you had said before, and you tell me if this is wrong, this law that Miss Brady showed you. When any person appears to have a mental illness and as a result of such mental illness appears to be an imminent danger to others or himself, or appears to be gravely disabled, and then the rest. Do you recall that language?
Yes, that's the mental health hold.
Anything about what Miss Brady asked you about causes you to change your mind about whether that guy was gravely disabled back on June the 11th or any day prior to that?
No.
How about whether or not there was an imminent danger to himself or others?
There was no evidence of that.
Does he ever give you a single fact about what we now know he had really been doing?
Objection asked and answered.
Overruled.
No.
Nothing further.
Any recross, Ms. Brady?
Very briefly. Mr. Brockler asked you about the HIPAA, and you said that protects the confidentiality of medical information.
Yes.
You felt like you needed to violate HIPAA in order to reach out to the Beta team and reach out to Mr. Holmes's mother for safety concerns. Is that correct?
Correct.
And when you expressed some of your concerns to Mrs. Holmes, you did not tell her that James was having thoughts of killing people 3 to 4 times a day.
Correct.
Does mental illness preclude someone from being frugal?
Not necessarily.
Does mental illness preclude someone from emailing?
Not necessarily.
Does mental illness preclude someone from being able to spell correctly?
Not necessarily.
Can intelligent people get serious mental illness?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, Doctor, the jury appears to have some questions for you, so I'm going to ask that you please give us a moment, okay? Thank you. Thank you. Would council please approach? All right, Dr. Fenton, the jury has some questions for you, but before I go through those questions, I have granted the request to publish People's Exhibit P-TR-1248, and so we're going to go ahead and do that first in case there may be another question or some other questions after that, okay?
Yes.
So if you would please, and my understanding, members of the jury, is that the parties have copies of the exhibit so that you don't have to pass a single copy from one person to the next person, but actually each of you can have your own copy. Because there's a witness that has a flight later tonight, I'm going to give you a limit of 20 minutes, okay? So you know in advance, it's 10 after 4. I'm going to stop you reviewing the exhibit at 4:30. As I have mentioned before, you'll have an opportunity to review exhibits that have been admitted later during deliberations. The other thing that I want to do is make sure that I remind you that all of the testimony by Dr. Fenton and the exhibit that was admitted, the exhibits admitted, P-TR-1248 as well as D-TR-62 have been admitted for a limited purpose. You may consider this evidence only as to the issues raised by the defendant's plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. You shall not consider this evidence for any other purpose. Does everyone understand that? And everyone's saying yes and nodding their head yes. Okay, Ms. Brady, do you have those copies? All right, if you would provide them to my staff, please. Ms. Gerlings and Ms. Robinson will then distribute them. And the 20 minutes start now. Yes, sir. As long as it's not about me, yes. All right. Ms. Nelson and Ms. Stitch McGuire, do you want to approach since we're waiting? Members of the jury, you have 2 more minutes. All right, do we have all of them back, Ms. Curlings? All right, the records will reflect that we just finished publishing Exhibit P-TR-1248. It appears that there's an additional question from the jury, so I'm going to need counsel to come up, please. Thank you. All right, Dr. Fenton.
Yes.
The jury has submitted some questions that, based on the rules of evidence and other applicable rules of law, I have determined are appropriate. The first question is, did you or the Beta team check on any weapon permits / application by the defendant? If you know.
I know that I spoke with a member of the campus police, and it was my understanding that part of that check included a weapons permit.
The next question is, did you take any notes during the session or after he left?
Both. Mostly during the sessions, I was not taking notes, and I would write them directly after the session.
The next question is, when did you contact the Beta team, the approximate date?
It was June 11th. It was probably less than an hour from when he left that last appointment. So it was pretty much immediately.
The next question is, when did you talk to his mother? Approximate date.
That was also June 11th, a little later in the afternoon.
Next is it your general practice that you schedule only 15 to 20 minutes with your patients at the beginning of treatment?
No, I schedule about a 50-minute session for the initial visit, and that's what James had.
The next question is, during your testimony, you have said a few different times that you didn't understand what he meant. Why didn't you ask him rather than speculating?
Every time he would say something that I didn't understand, I did try to get him to clarify it, but it was rare that he gave me any additional information.
The next question is, can you explain what schizoid personality disorder and social phobia mean to you? What do these terms mean to you?
Yes, I'll start with social phobia because I think that's the easiest to understand, and it's very common. So that is where people are quite nervous about any social interactions. The personality disorders, so in general, a personality disorder is when the way that a person interacts with the world and with others is somewhat rigid, and it poses a problem for them. Schizoid and schizotypal are similar personality disorders. The schizoid personality disorder you could think of as sort of an extreme loner who has real problems interacting with other people, and furthermore, they're not that interested in interpersonal interactions. Schizotypal is similar. They also have problems with interacting with other people, but what is more prominent with them are some odd thoughts, sometimes magical thinking, perhaps believing they have magical powers themselves. So sort of more of an odd and quirky personality.
The next question is, the diagnosis sheet for May 1, 2012 and March 16, 2012 list cannabis abuse. Was that a factor in your overall assessment of the defendant?
No, it turns out that's a mistake. When you're looking at the billing statements, there are numbers, which are the codes both to the left of the written diagnosis and to the right. And it's very easy to accidentally circle the incorrect one. So on that date where it looks like we're coding for cannabis abuse, it actually applies to the diagnosis to the right, which is obsessive compulsive disorder.
And the final question is, the email where the defendant says, an inconvenience, Fenton, is signed simply Holmes. Did he ever use Holmes to refer to himself in any other instance?
No.
Any follow-up questions based on those questions and answers? Mr. Brockler.
Just a couple, Your Honor. Thank you. Doctor, in describing the differences between schizoid and schizotypal, you referenced the possibility of magical thinking or thinking that someone had magical powers. Did you ever get any information like that from the defendant?
No.
In terms of you talked about a social anxiety or phobia that might make someone an extreme loner. Do you recall talking about that?
Well, that's sort of conflating two things. So I talked about social phobia, and then separately I was talking about schizoid personality disorder, and that was what I described as the extreme loner type.
And when you're considering those things, it sounds like you're taking into consideration all the words spoken in the presentation by the defendant.
Correct.
Did you know during April, before this May 1st meeting that you had, that he had signed up for Match.com?
No.
Would that be something that would be suggestive of someone who isn't looking to be all by himself all the time?
Yes.
Can I, Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to try to clear up that last juror question by using the Elmo.
Okay.
Ma'am, I just want to put up there the May 1st diagnosis sheet, if I could, and have you just use the visual to talk about it.
Sure.
That's the penultimate question then, not the last one, right?
Can I have Mr. Orman tell me what penultimate means? For second to last. Yes. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Just wanted to make sure.
Can you make it do whatever it's supposed to do? Oh, the part right here. Okay. Ma'am, this part right here, you see that on your screen right
I
there?
do.
We see a number that looks like 300 point something can't read next to what looks like obsessive compulsive disorder. Describe for us again, now that we have this visual, what you were saying, because to the left of that number, you can see how someone would easily think that might be cannabis abuse.
Right. So on this form, the number associated with the diagnosis is slightly to the left. So that 300.3 is associated with obsessive compulsive disorder. It would be easy to look at and say, oh, perhaps that's the code for cannabis abuse, but that's incorrect.
And to be clear, there is, and thank you, ma'am, there is no information that you have from the defendant or any other source about any sort of cannabis abuse by the defendant. Fair?
Correct.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Ms. Brady, any follow-up questions from you?
Very briefly. Doctor, regarding the question about schizotypal personality disorder,
Yes.
can symptoms or signs of that disorder be odd thinking in speech?
Yes.
Is that one of the symptoms that you were thinking of when you were talking about schizotypal personality disorder?
Yes.
And suspiciousness or paranoid ideation?
Yes.
Are those some of the things you were considering?
They are.
Thank you.
May Dr. Fenton be released from her subpoena, Mr. Brockler? Is there any objection, Ms. Brady?
Your Honor, I would like to under subpoena just in the unlikely.
All right, doctor, you're done for now, but you are subject to being called again, okay? All right, thank you. If you would give those exhibits here, give them to me and I'll give them to Mike. Thank you. Thank you. All right, thank you, doctor. Kathy. Call your next witness, please, Mr. Edson.
Deborah Foley.
Ms. Foley, I'll remind you that you're still under oath, okay?
Yes.
Thanks for your patience.
You're welcome.
All right, Mr. Edson, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Judge, at this time I would request permission to publish People's Exhibit 795, individual copies to the jury to be collected at the end, please.
All right, would counsel please approach for just a moment? All right, the request to publish is granted. And members of the jury, we're going to publish this exhibit in the same way that we published the last one. That is to say, each one of you will get your own copy. I need to give you an instruction with respect to this exhibit. This exhibit has been admitted with redactions. You are instructed that you are not to draw any inferences from those redactions. Does everyone understand that? And everyone's saying yes and not in their head yes. All right, with that, Mr. Edson, do you have the copies of the exhibit? Which exhibit is it?
795?
Of 795 P-TR-795?
Yes.
All right, if you would give those to Ms. Robinson and Ms. Gerlings, please, so that they can distribute them. We'll publish them right now. And Mr. Edson, my understanding is that you want to continue your direct examination as the jurors are holding a copy of the exhibit. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Juror appears to have a copy of P-TR-795 now. Mr. Edson, you may continue your direct examination of Ms. Foley.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, do you have People's Exhibit 795 in front of you?
Yes, I do.
So what I'd like to do is there's a few selected pages I'd like you to give some testimony on to kind of explain for us what we're looking at in this exhibit, okay?
Okay.
How I'm going to refer to this, in the bottom right corner, there's some numbers, and some of them will read 42, and it's got a /49277. Others may just have the 49277. Do you see that on your document?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so that's the first page that I want to look at, which is the first page of this document. Just in general, what is this page we're looking at here?
We're looking at the membership agreement.
Ms. Foley, I'm sorry. Could you pull the microphone closer to your mouth, please, so that we can all hear you? Go ahead.
Is that better?
That's better. Thank you.
And is this the membership agreement for James Holmes?
Yes, it is.
Does this also show the joint owner information on this particular page as well?
Yes, it does.
Is this particular Point Loma account, does it have joint owners?
Yes, it does.
And who are the joint owners?
Joint owners are Robert Holmes and Arlene Holmes.
As we move through the different statements, does it show the joint owners of Robert and Arlene Holmes throughout this exhibit?
No, it doesn't.
Okay. The next page is 49624. Do you see that?
Yes.
Fair to say this is the May 2011 statement of account, is that correct?
Yes.
So what I'd like to do first is just tell the jury to the left corner there, first of all, I see James Egan Holmes. I'm guessing that's the address information. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Below that, it's got an account number. Is that the account for this statement?
Yes.
Talk to us about, underneath that, it says primary savings and just what those boxes refer to, please.
It's primary savings, and it has the joint owners, is the Robert Holmes and Arlene Holmes, and the balances of the savings account, checking account on this page, and the activity that happened on the accounts during that time frame.
So as of the beginning of May 2011, what was the beginning balance for that savings account?
$700.12.
The next, below that set of boxes, I think it says harbor checking. Tell us what, in general, those boxes refer to.
Those boxes show the beginning balance, the ending balance, and the transaction that took place. The date is on the far left side, the transaction, and then the amount of the transaction and the ending balance.
As we go down here, continuing on page 49624, I'm just going to direct your attention to the third entry. It's dated 0503, May 3rd, for a target. Do you see what I'm referring to?
Yes.
Just walk us through that transaction, just to tell us how to actually read these different checking transactions.
Okay, well, this is a withdrawal using the debit card, the Point Loma Credit Union debit card at Target, and it gives the address and which the store which was visited, and then the amount of $297.24.
What does POS mean, if you know?
Point of sale.
As joint owners up right underneath the primary savings that you were referring to, do those individuals have access to the account activity?
Yes, they do.
I would next direct your attention to page 49627. It's a few pages in. Do you see that?
I see.
What are we looking at here?
I'm looking at a check number 164 payable to Holly Realty and Management LLC for $599. It has the memo note, May rent, $1690, number 10.
Fair to say that any checks associated with that month would be right after the statement? Is that how this is set up?
Yes.
So for time's sake, I'm going to fast forward us to May of 2012. That could be found on page 49669. Do you see what I'm referring to?
Yes. May 31st, 2012?
Yes. So as of May 2012, how much was in primary savings?
$900.
What was the beginning balance for the checking account?
$6,777.10.
Going to the next page, this would be the second page of the May 2012 statement. It's found on 49670. Near the bottom, there's a box that says money management. What does that refer to?
That's a money management account. It's a separate share with the credit union.
Is that still associated with this account for James Egan Holmes?
Yes, it is.
What was the beginning balance as of May 2012 in that account?
$11,012.96.
I'm going to direct your attention now to the June 2012 statements. They begin on page 49673. And let me know when you are at that location.
I have that in front of me.
The third entry under the harbor checking, it would be June 4th. It starts with the word deposit home. Do you see where I'm referring to?
Yes.
What is that referring to?
That's a home banking transfer from his money management account to the checking account.
A few down, look at June 12th. That would be 6/12, a withdrawal ACH. Do you see what I'm referring to?
Yes.
What is that?
That's withdrawal. It's ACH from USAA.com payment. It's a credit card payment,
What was the amount of that payment?
$1,079.71.
What does ACH stand for?
Automated clearinghouse.
What does that mean?
That means it's automatically done through the system, through the automated clearinghouse system. You can set it up where it's automatically debited.
The next page, which is the second page of the June 2012 statement, that's page 49674. The first entry, June 15th, a deposit. What are we looking at here?
Another deposit from the home banking transfer from Holmes Family T. It's a separate account membership and it's a primary share for $5,000.
If we scroll down here a bit further to the June 27th deposit, what is that referring to? I'm sorry, June 29th. Right.
Okay. That's a direct deposit, ACH direct deposit from the University of Colorado.
Have you had an opportunity to view the various month statements? Really?
Yes.
Is that an occurring type of deposit from the University of Colorado?
Yes, it is.
I'm going to direct your attention to July 1st, 2012 statement. That's on page 49677. And I'll direct your attention to the date of July 1st withdrawal. Do you see what I'm referring to?
Yes.
What is that information?
Well, there's three July 1st withdrawals. They're all point of sale. The first one is on Jewel Avenue, Aurora, Colorado for $2,033.23. And the second one is a point of sale from King Supers for $112.99. And then, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Let me direct your attention to the July 2nd transactions. It says PayPal. Do you see where I'm referring?
Yes.
What is that activity related to?
That activity is what we call a micro deposit. And withdrawals, it's setting it up to make sure the account is active prior to any ACH transactions being processed.
Direct your attention to the next page on 49678. This is, again, July 1st. I'm going to direct your attention to the dates, roughly July 8th. Are there withdrawals from ATMs?
Yes, there are.
How many?
On July 8th, there are 3.
Direct your attention to July 9th. Was there a withdrawal from the debit card on that date?
Yes.
What was that for?
That was for Bass Pro Shops.
What was the amount?
$1,149.24.
Direct your attention to page 49681. Do you see what I'm referring to?
49681.
Yes.
I have yes.
Okay. Does that appear to be a check?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Tell us about this check, please.
This check, again, is payable to Holly Realty and Management, LLC, for $629 for July rent at 1640 Paris Street, number 10,
What was the date of this check?
6/29/12.
Could that also read 1690 Paris Street?
Yes.
Judge, may I have one moment, please?
Yes.
No further questions at this time, Judge. Thank you.
All right, is there any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. There's just a couple things I'd like to clarify with you, ma'am, okay?
Sure.
With regard to these records, am I correct that there are actually 3 different types of accounts?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a primary savings rate,
Yes.
a harbor checking account,
Yes.
and a money management account.
Correct.
Now, they are all under the same account number that's in the upper right-hand corner of the statements,
Yes,
but they are designated by different numbers for the different types of accounts.
the share types.
Okay. Now, with regard to the joint owners on the primary savings, what these indicate is that Robert and Arlene Holmes are joint owners solely with regard to the primary savings. Is that correct?
No,
They are not listed under the harbor checking?
they're listed as, on the relationship, they're listed under the relationship.
So they're listed as joint owners under primary savings -001 if you look at page 49624.
Yes,
Okay. And then when you go down to harbor checking -0080, they're not listed as joint owners. Is that correct?
I'd have to look and see how the account relationship is set up.
Okay.
When I was looking at this, prior to me leaving, they were set up under the relationship.
Okay, what I'm asking you about is what is on this document. It's
That
not
says that they're under the primary savings.
Okay, and they're not listed under the harbor checking,
Correct.
correct? And they're not listed under the money market account, correct? Okay. Now, do you know when the primary savings account was opened?
It was opened August 30th, 2000. I'm sorry, August 10th, 2000.
Okay. And so if you look at the date of birth for Mr. Holmes, that would indicate that he was how old when he opened that savings account?
13?
Right. Would it be uncommon for a 13-year-old to have parents as his joint owners on his account?
No.
Okay. Now, do you know when the harbor checking account was opened up?
I don't have that information here.
Okay. What about the money market account that was opened up? Do you know when that was opened?
I don't have that information here.
Okay. With regard to page, I'm sorry, they're very tiny. Give me a second. 49627. That's a check, correct?
Yes,
You said earlier that somebody could set up automatic payments on the account, and that's indicated in various places on the statements is it by the ACH?
yes,
Okay. So when somebody sets up an automatic payment on account, they have to provide sort of that account information to the place the automatic payment is going. Is that fair?
correct.
Okay. So when we look at the account information, there's what's called a routing number, correct?
Correct,
And an account number, correct?
correct.
And so those are indicated here on the bottom of this check, is that right?
Yes,
So the routing number would be 3222-81484,
yes,
and the account number for the checking account would be 180-000-013-5566, correct?
correct.
Okay. Now, I just want to go through a couple of these statements with you. I'm going to try to be brief because I know everybody's staying really late. When you look through these account records with regard to the primary savings, and you've reviewed all of these records, right?
Correct,
It's fair to say that there's not a lot of account activity from May of 2011 all the way through to the end of these records with regard to that primary savings account.
correct.
There's only actually one time, and I believe it is, let me see if I can get the page really quick. I think it's page 49650. So there's one time where there's a deposit by check into that primary savings account.
Yes,
And that's when the account goes from $700.27 to $900.29.
correct.
Okay. And other than that, and the dividend deposits of a couple cents here and there, there's really no other activity on that count starting way back in May of 2011 through September of 2012.
No,
Okay. Now, I also want to point out let me get the page number. This would be page 49628. So now it seems on this page that the address is changed for Mr. Holmes from the,
Yes.
from the month before. Is that right?
Yes,
It goes from a San Diego address to an Aurora, Colorado address?
correct.
Would that indicate that he sent in information to your bank to change his address?
Yes.
There's just a couple other things I'm going to point out. And that, the first one is, on page 49647. So this is in November of 2011, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And there is, in this time period that these records cover, that's the first deposit into the money management account, is that right?
There's a deposit into the money management account, yes.
Okay. And there's not that's when the account goes from what it started at in May as, well, $10,709.81, and then we go up to an ending in May, and then an ending balance there in November of $12,211, reflecting some dividend deposits as well as that transfer, correct?
Correct.
When this is a home banking transfer, that is an online activity, is that correct?
Yes.
So your customers have access to their accounts through the computer?
Yes.
They wouldn't have to call and talk to anybody to transfer monies between their accounts?
No.
Okay. Now my next if you can go to 49661, and that would be March of 2012.
Okay.
There is another indicator on here on March 6th of a deposit transfer from Holmes Family T. Did you see that?
Yes, I do.
That's similar to the other deposit from Holmes Family T that you talked about earlier.
Yes.
And that is from an account that is from a different account number.
Correct.
Okay. So that would be held by other people.
Correct.
Okay. You also see here again for this month that there seems to be sort of a transfer to the money management account, and this is, if you go forward 2 pages to 49663, as well as a withdrawal from the money management account.
Yes.
A deposit of $3,800 and a withdrawal of $5,000.
A withdrawal of $3,800 on 3/17.
Mm-hmm.
And a withdrawal on 3/25 of $5,000.
Okay. And that is back to, like, from and to the checking account?
The withdrawal to the share for $3,800 and deposit to the share of 8 for $3,800, yes.
Okay. And then if you go back 2 pages to 9662, you see that there's reflected that deposit of $5,000, right?
Correct.
And then there's a withdrawal to E-Trade of $4,000, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And that's an ACH transfer?
Yes.
So that's something that's set up?
Someone that was set up through E-Trade.
Okay. And do you know what E-Trade is?
E-Trade is a
Like an investment?
investment account.
Okay.
Correct.
And then my last question is on page 49673. So this is as of June of 2012, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I just want to highlight for the jury, if you could indicate the balance on the primary savings at that time is about $900. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the balance on the harbor checking, the ending balance in that month is about $7,365.24, correct?
Correct.
And the money management account is at $8,000.17, correct?
Correct.
Thank you, ma'am. I don't have any other questions.
Mr. Edson, do you have any redirect?
Two quick area judges, if I may.
Go ahead.
You were asked about the savings account and how it stayed somewhat the same. Do you remember being asked about that?
Yes.
What about the money management account? Did that stay the same relative through these months?
Well, there are transfers going in and coming out of it.
Okay, so I'm going to draw your attention to page 49666, which is the money management account as of the end of April 2012.
Yes.
What was the balance then?
$11,012.96.
I will then direct your attention to page 49679, which is the end of, just a few months later, July 2012. What was the ending balance at the end of July 2012 in that same money management account?
$3,000.07.
Going back to the very first page of this document, up at the top it says member/applicant, not the very top, but the top of the written area that says member applicant. Do you see that?
Yes.
There's some numbers associated with that. Is that the account number?
Yes, that's the membership number or the account number.
Okay. Is that the same membership number that is referred to as the account number at the various statements throughout this document?
Yes, it is.
Is not the joint owners associated with that particular member account number?
Yes.
Would they then have access to the various accounts within that account, including the primary savings, the checking, and the money management?
It would depend on when the checking account and the money management opened.
Okay.
This is the initial document we have here is the initial, what we called at the time a Looney Tunes account for youth, and they required joint owners. And so then I don't have documentation here when the checking and the money management were set up.
Okay, fair enough. Let me direct your attention to page 49677. That is the first page of the July 2012 statement.
Okay.
Joint owners still listed under the primary
For
savings?
the primary savings.
Okay. And they were listed throughout from the beginning until the end, at least as far as these records are concerned?
Correct.
Judge, one moment, please.
Okay.
Nothing further, Judge. Thank you.
Is there any recross?
No, Your Honor, there's not.
All right, and the jury does not appear to have any questions for Ms. Foley. May Ms. Foley be released from her subpoena?
Yes, sir.
Any objection? All right, Ms. Foley, thank you. I know you have a flight to catch, so you can leave if you want. You can run if you wish. All right, and the record should reflect that we are now retrieving the copies of P-TR-795 from the jury. Members of the jury, it's 17 after 5. I appreciate your patience and your willingness to stay a little bit late today. Please remember all my advisements related to your conduct when you're not here. Remember that they're all important, and each and every one of you must comply with each of those advisements, okay? Please. And then get some rest tonight, and I'll see you tomorrow morning at the usual time. Thanks so much. Please be seated, everyone. The record should reflect that the jury has left the courtroom. I have a couple of housekeeping matters. On June 9, I dismissed 3 jurors, and after dismissing the 3 jurors, I denied the defense's request to poll all of the jurors. And I indicated at the time that what I would do is that I would, at some point in my advisements, at the end of the day, related to the jurors' conduct when they're not here in the courtroom, I would add something along the lines of, if you have ever heard any juror make a statement about the case or say anything about the case, you need to report that by telling my staff that you need to talk to me about something. And I made a record previously that I did that at the end of the day on June 9 during the advisements. I wanted to make a record that I also did that at the end of the day on June 11th, on Thursday of last week. I included that to my, in the advisements, I added that to my advisements, I should say, at the end of the day on Thursday, June 11, and I specifically said not only from here on out, but to the extent that you've ever heard any juror make a statement about the case, you need to report that by letting my staff know that, you need to talk to me, and then we can talk about it. So I wanted to make a record about that. The other thing I have on my housekeeping list is there's a possibility that the prosecution may finish its case on Friday, and I'm wondering, and I'm just inquiring whether there is any possibility of starting the defense's case earlier than the 25th, which is when the defense is scheduled to start, in the event that the prosecution ends on Friday instead of Tuesday of next week. Mr. King.
Your Honor, I cannot represent that we can do that. We've been really struggling, and that's why I was really kept asking for a date for when we were going to start. We have a lot of things scheduled, and that's just not possible. I apologize, but it's not.
And so you think the earliest you can start is on the 25th?
That's correct, sir.
And you're still looking at approximately 2 weeks?
I think it'll be less than that.
Okay. All right. All right. Just thought I would inquire. Is there anything we need to talk about at this time on behalf of the people? Ms. Teach McGuire?
Your Honor, if I could please have the next C-TR number for an exhibit that was originally marked as People's Exhibit P1173.
62.
C-TR-62.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Edson, did you raise your hand as well? Mr. Orman stands up. Mr. Edson raises his hand.
I did, but it's a bit moot now because I had a bunch of exhibits that had CTs on them as well, but now they're misnumbered because of Ms. Tisha McGuire just taking that last number. So that's okay. What I'm gonna do is,
All right. So what should Ms. Teach McGuire mark that last exhibit as?
65.
All right. So Ms. Teach McGuire will mark P-TR-1173 as C-TR-65. Is that right?
I don't know if Mr. Edson's right. I'd like him to say his numbers first.
All right. Why don't we do this? Why don't I let you talk with each other tonight, and then you can tell me tomorrow how you'd like to proceed. All right. Is there anything on behalf of the defense, Mr. King or Ms. Nelson?
No, Your Honor, I'm going to approach your court staff after we adjourn with C-TR 61, which is defense TR 63.
All right. Thank you. All right. Have a good evening, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you. The court will be in recess.